This is my first time watching through the Marvel franchise, so I was taken by surprise with Jon Favreau's 2010 superhero sequel, Iron Man 2. The contemplation of death and legacy produced a much deeper Tony Stark than the jet-setting rock star I expected. And it may be premature to call it, but this is already my favorite Marvel movie. I'm excited to see what awaits me in the MCU, and you can expect a new breakdown every third video, weaving it through my regular genre rotation. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start as always with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. Tony Stark's Iron Man confession rekindles a dormant grudge, and Ivan Vanko inherits the shared legacy of the arc reactor. Then Tony enjoys his rockstar lifestyle as his downfall looms ever closer. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Tony strokes his massive ego on stage to a classic rock soundtrack, while a medical complication from the arc reactor limits his time on Earth, and everyone wants a piece of his celebrity. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. A congressional subpoena lands on his lap, which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and also what remains the same. Tony defends his ownership of the Iron Man suit before the US Senate, and professional adversary Justin Hammer contrasts him against his father. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Rhodey is forced to mischaracterize a comprehensive report and further divulge classified information to the general public, while Ivan watches Tony's ego save his ass yet again. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always smaller in scope than what the third act will demand. Ivan prepares himself to finally exact revenge against the Stark family, while Tony fights back against the arc reactor's fatal side effect and scrambles to secure the continuation of the Stark brand. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. Ivan's sneaky ways of getting to Tony, the growing presence of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Tony's life, and his preparations to shuffle off his mortal coil. Which brings us to the brief events that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Tony relinquishes full control of his company, marking one legacy position taken care of. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they learn the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Tony keeps his situation and plans secret from everyone around him, until it's unavoidable to tell them, while fending off adversaries on every level, including the poisonous one in his veins, and surrendering to his own wealthy, eccentric whims. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat rather than internal or emotional. Ivan steps from the shadows to begin his downfall of the Stark Empire. Then the Iron Man team jumps into action, while suitless Tony successfully avoids getting killed by this arc reactor baddie, until everyone comes together and saves the day. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Hammer sees a future partnership in the whip-wielding maniac. Ivan explains how deeply he damaged the untouchable image of Iron Man, and Tony searches for the right way to tell Pepper about his impending death. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Ivan is broken out of prison and delivered to the waiting arms of Hammer. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story, which they've gathered and learned so far. Tony confesses to the palladium issue of his arc reactor, bringing Rhodey a little closer to the Iron Man legacy dilemma. Then Hammer and Ivan solidify their partnership to usurp the Iron Man suit all together. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements from the first act are used to gauge their progress. Tony's Act 1 toxicity levels are quickly reaching the fatal mark, and comments aloud about his Act 1 impending mortality. Then dives into a sad recreation of his Act 1 onstage persona, but it quickly descends into dangerous antics, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Rhodey suits up as War Machine, subtly proving he was Tony's choice to replace him, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Rhodey proves himself more than capable in the unpainted suit, and Tony watches his final bit of unfinished business jet away. Next, our characters complete their smaller scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless, without also completing a larger scope objective. Rhodey kinda delivers on his promise to get Iron Man back on the watch, but hands over private tech to the chain of command. S.H.I.E.L.D. finally makes their presence in Tony's life known, but Nick Fury only gives him a little more time in a vague riddle. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self, their worldly identity, or their physical journey. Hammer discovers that Ivan is working on something a little more devious than an Iron Man suit, while the military calls Hammer in to take possession of Rhodey's suit. Then Fury connects the history of Tony and Ivan's fathers and drops off a care package from Howard Stark himself. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. While the War Machine suit is prepped for a major overhaul, Tony hears the message from his father that proudly anoints him as his successor. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Tony is prevented from confessing to his imminent death, and he's booted from the lives of the only ones around him. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. Tony solves his father's expo riddle and finds a theoretical new element, then proves that theory by way of his superhuman engineering skills, and creates the godlike answer to his arc reactor dilemma, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. It's revealed to us that Ivan has been working on an upgrade to his original weapon, which very nearly defeated Iron Man before. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the larger scope objective. Ivan contacts Tony to signal the start of his endgame mission, who again jumps past safety precautions to charge into action, while Hammer crowds the stage with Ivan's battle drones. Then Tony arrives to intercept whatever is about to happen. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. War Machine fights Iron Man, but with Joan backup. Pepper takes charge in an emergency situation. Black Widow whoops more than just Jon Favreau's ass, and Happy is still in the movie. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Black Widow frees War Machine from Ivan's grasp. Tony accidentally confesses his impending death to Pepper. He and Rhodey fight through Ivan's remaining drones. Then Ivan arrives for the final boss fight, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Tony recalls his brawl with Rhodey, and teamwork takes down Ivan. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Ivan reveals his final surprise, and the defeated drones self-destruct, but Tony saves Pepper just in the nick of time. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. Rhodey confirms that he's keeping the War Machine suit, and Fury rescinds his offer for Tony to join the Avengers on Black Widow's behest. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Tony is awarded by the very senator who empowered Hammer in the first place, and returns to his place as king of the world. And there you have it. Jon Favreau's 2010 action blockbuster Iron Man 2 adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. The contemplation of death provided emotional weight to what otherwise could have been a mindless action free-for-all. Now let's move on from a man overcoming the curse in his blood to a young girl accepting her curse of the red panda. Join me next time for Domi Shi's 2022 coming-of-age comedy, Turning Red. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.